Hello, everybody. This is Corey Simpson, Executive Artistic Director at Thunder River Theater Company. Thanks so much for joining us for another ThunderStream. I think this is number 6. And hope everyone's hanging in out there and trying to stay healthy. And we're so excited today to bring a couple people on with a great program that I'm going to tell you about in just a second. But first, I want to let everybody know that Thunder River Theater Company is going to be doing what we're calling our Extrava Gala. And it is a virtual variety show, and that's going to be on May 7th. And hopefully, if you have the ability to maybe help us out a little bit at the theater, you can imagine it's tricky times. And I know that a lot of you are struggling out there too. But we'd love your help. If you're interested in making a donation toward that, you can always go to our website at thunderrivertheater.com, and there's a donate button at the top of the screen. But hopefully you'll join us on May 7th. With that, I would love to bring on Janice Esty and Jeannie Walla. And Janice runs the Literature Out Loud program, which is sponsored by Pitkin County Library. And Janice has this fabulous program that she's been doing for years. Thanks so much for coming on today, guys.
Oh, thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Hey, just really quickly before we jump into some readings by Nora Ephron today, Janice, do you want to just tell us real quickly how Literature Out Loud got started?
Yeah, I'd love to. I had an idea after I'd been listening to Selected Shorts, which is on NPR out of New York City. They have readers like Meryl Streep. You know, we don't have Meryl, but we've got Jeannie, which is better. And the library was good enough to allow me to pick great pieces of literature, pair it with great readers, because I know a lot of fabulous readers in the Roaring Fork Valley. And we've been doing this program monthly at the library live for almost 9 years, believe it or not.
That's fantastic.
And it's wonderful. But given the circumstances right now, I can't be more happy and more grateful to Corey and Thunder River for letting us do it this way, because it's new to me, by golly, but it's wonderful.
I'm so excited that we get to do this morning. I can't wait for these readings. So we'll come back and chat maybe after the two of you are done with your readings, just to see how you are doing and finish things up. But why don't we go ahead and just jump in?
Great. I'd like to introduce Jeannie, if I may.
Absolutely.
She'll be reading About Breasts by Nora Ephron. We've got 4 different pieces that span Nora Ephron's writing from 1972 until 2010. So she's a busy woman. And one of her best quotes that I know is, above all, be the heroine of your life, not the victim.
Wow.
Nobody embodies that better than Jeannie Walla.
Oh,
I love that.
Thank you. Well, the name of the story is A Few Words About Breasts. And some of you who know me know that I've been through a very interesting breast adventure this year. And so this story is particularly poignant to me. And let's get started. A Few Words About Breasts by Nora Ephron. I have to begin with a few words about androgyny. In grammar school, in the 5th and 6th grades, we were all tyrannized by a rigid set of rules that supposedly determined whether we were boys or girls. The episode in Huckleberry Finn, where Huck is disguised as a girl and gives himself away by the way he threads a needle and catches a ball, that kind of thing, we learned that the way you sat, crossed your legs, held a cigarette, and looked at your nails, the way you did these things instinctively was absolute proof of your sex. Now, obviously, most children did not take this literally, but I did. I thought that just one slip, just one innocent cross of my legs or flick of an imaginary cigarette ash would turn me from whatever I was into the other thing. That would be all it took, really. Even though I was outwardly a girl and had many of the trappings generally associated with girldom, a girl's name, for example, and dresses, my own telephone, an autograph book, I spent the early years of my adolescence absolutely certain that I might at any point gum it up. I did not feel at all like a girl. I was boyish. I was athletic, ambitious, outspoken, competitive, noisy, rambunctious. I had scabs on my knees, and my socks slid into my loafers, and I could throw a football. I wanted desperately not to be that way, not to be a mixture of both things, but instead just one, a girl, a definite, indisputable girl, as soft and as pink as a nursery. And nothing would do that for me, I felt, but breasts. I was about 6 months younger than everyone else in my class, and so for about 6 months after it began, for 6 months after my friends had begun to develop, that was the word we used, develop, I was not particularly worried. I would sit in the bathtub and look down at my breasts and know that any day now they would start growing like everyone else's. They didn't. I want to buy a bra, I said to my mother. What for? She said. My mother was really hateful about bras, and by the time my third sister had gotten to the point where she was ready to want one, my mother had worked the whole business into a comedy routine. Why not use a Band-Aid instead? She would say. It was a source of great pride to my mother that she had never even had to wear a brassiere until she had her fourth child, and then only because her gynecologist made her. It was incomprehensible that anyone could ever be proud of something like that. It wasn't the 1950s, for God's sake. Jane Russell, cashmere sweaters. Couldn't my mother see that? I am too old to wear an undershirt. Screaming, weeping, shouting. Then don't wear an undershirt, my mother said. But I want to buy a bra. What for? I suppose that for most girls, breasts, brassieres, that entire thing had more trauma, more to do with the coming of adolescence than with becoming a woman than anything else. Certainly more than getting your period, although that too was traumatic, symbolic. But you could see breasts. They were there. They were visible. Whereas a girl could claim to have her period for months before she actually had it, and nobody would ever know the difference, which is exactly what I did. All you had to do was make a great fuss over having enough nickels for the Kotex machine and walk around clutching your stomach and moaning for 3 to 5 days a month about the curse, and you could convince anybody. There is a school of thought somewhere in the women's mag gynecology experiments that claims that menstrual cramps are purely psychological. And I lean toward it. Not that I didn't have them finally, agonizing cramps, heating pad cramps, go down to the school nurse and lie on the cot cramps. But unlike any pain I had ever suffered, I adored the pain of cramps. Welcomed it, wallowed in it, bragged about it. I can't go. I have cramps. I can't do that. I have cramps. And most of all, gigglingly, blushingly, I can't swim. I have cramps. Nobody ever used the hardcore word menstruation. God, what an awful word. Never that. I have cramps. The morning I had a period, I went into my mother's bedroom to tell her, and my mother, utterly hateful about bras, Mom, burst into tears. It was really a lovely moment. And I remember it so clearly, not just because it was the one of the 2 times I ever saw my mother cry on my account. The other was when I was caught being a 6-year-old kleptomaniac. But also because the incident did not mean to me what it meant to her. Her little girl, her firstborn, had finally become a woman. That was what she was crying about. My reaction to the event, however, was that I might well be a woman in some specific textbook sense and could at least stop faking every month and stop wasting all those nickels. But in another sense, in a visible sense, I was as androgynous and as liable to rip over into boyhood as ever. I started with a 28 AA bra. I don't think they made them any smaller in those days, although I gather that now you can buy bras for 5-year-olds that don't have any cups whatsoever. Trainer bras, they're called. My first brassiere came from Robinson's department store in Beverly Hills. I went there alone, shaking, positive they would look me over and smile and tell me to come back next year. An actual fitter took me into the dressing room and stood over me while I shook off my blouse and tried the first one on. The little puffs stood out on my chest. "Lean over," said the fitter. To this day, I am not sure what fitters in bra departments do except to tell you to lean over. I leaned over, and with the fleeting hope that my breasts would miraculously fall out of my body and into the puffs. Nothing. "Don't worry about it," said my friend Libby some months later when things had not improved. "You'll get them after you're married." "What are you talking about?" I said. "When you get married," Libby explained, "your husband will touch your breasts and rub them and kiss them, and they'll grow." That was the killer. Necking. I could deal with it. Intercourse, I could deal with. But it had never occurred, never crossed my mind that a man was going to touch my breasts, that breasts had something to do with all that. Petting. My God. They never mentioned petting in my little sex manual about the fertilization of the ovum. I became dizzy, for I knew instantly, as naive as I had been only a moment before, that the only part of what she was saying was true. The touching, rubbing, kissing part, not the growing part. And I knew that no one would ever want to marry me. I had no breasts. I would never have breasts. My best friend in school was Diana Raskob. She lived a block from me in a house full of wonders. English muffins, for instance. The Raskobs were the first people in Beverly Hills to have English muffins for breakfast. They also had an apricot tree in the back, and a badminton court, and a subscription to 17 magazine, and hundreds of games like Sorry and Parcheesi and Treasure Hunt and Anagrams. Diana and I spent 3 or 4 afternoons a week in their den reading and playing and eating. Diana's mother had a kitchen, and it was full of the most colossal assortment of junk food I have ever been exposed to. My house was full of apples and peaches and milk and homemade chocolate chip cookies, which were nice and good for you, but not right before dinner or you'll spoil your appetite. Diana's house had nothing in it that was good for you. And what's more, you could stuff it in right up until dinner and nobody cared. Barbecue potato chips. They were the first in them, too. Giant bottles of ginger ale. Fresh popcorn with melted butter. Hot fudge sauce on Baskin-Robbins Jamocha ice cream. Powdered sugar donuts from Vandy Camps. Diana and I had been best friends since we were 7. We were about equally popular in school, which is to say, not particularly. We had about the same success with boys, extremely intermittent, and we looked much the same, tall, dark, gangly. It is September, just before school begins. I am 11 years old, about to enter the 7th grade, and Diana and I have not seen each other all summer. I have been to camp, and she has been somewhere like Banff with her parents. We are meeting, as we often do, on the street, midway between our two houses. And we will walk back to Diana's and eat junk and talk about what happened to each of us that summer. I am walking down Walden Drive in my jeans and my father's shirt hanging out, and my old red loafers with the socks falling into them, and coming toward me is, I take a deep breath, a young woman, Diana. Her hair is curled, and she has a waist and hips and a bust, and she is wearing a straight skirt, an article of clothing I have been repeatedly told I will be unable to wear until I have the hips to hold it up. My jaw drops, and suddenly I'm crying hysterically. I can't catch my breath, sobbing. My best friend has betrayed me. She has gone ahead without me and done it. She has shaped up. Here are some things I did to help. Bought a Mark Eden bus developer. Slept on my back for 4 years. Splashed cold water on them every night because some French actress said in Life magazine that that's what she did for her perfect bus line. Ultimately, I resigned myself to a bad toss and began to wear padded bras. I think about them now. Think about all those years in high school. I went around in them. 3 padded bras. Every single one of them with different size breasts. Each time I changed bras, I changed sizes. 1 week, nice, perky, but not too obtrusive breasts. The next, medium-sized, slightly pointy ones. The next week, knockers, true knockers, all the time, whatever size I was, carrying around this rubberized appendage on my chest that occasionally crashed into a wall and was poked inward and had to be poked outward. I think about all that, and I wonder how anyone kept a straight face throughout it. My parents, who normally had no restraints about needling me, why did they say nothing as they watched my chest go up and down? My friends, who would periodically inspect my breasts for signs of growth and reassure me, why didn't they at least counsel consistency? And the bathing suits. I die when I think about the bathing suits. That was the era when you could lay an uninhabited bathing suit on the beach and someone would make a pass at it. I would put one on, an absurd swimsuit with its enormous bust built into it, the bones from the suit stabbing me in the ribcage and leaving little red welts on my body. And there I would be, my chest plunging straight downward, absolutely vertically from my collarbone to the top of my suit, and then suddenly, wham, out came all that padding and material and wiring absolutely horizontally. Buster Klepper was the first boy who ever touched them. He was my boyfriend my sister's senior year of high school. There is a picture of him in my high school yearbook that makes him look quite attractive in a Jewish horn-rimmed glasses sort of way. But the picture does not show the pimples, which were airbrushed out, or the dumbness. Well, that isn't really fair. He wasn't dumb. He just wasn't terribly bright. His mother refused to accept it, refused to accept the relentlessly average report cards, refused to deal with her son's inevitable destiny in some junior college or other. He was tested, she would say to me, apropos of nothing. And it came out 145. That's near genius. Had the word underachiever been coined, she probably would have lobbed that one at me too. Anyway, Buster was really very sweet, which is, I know, damning with faint praise. But there it is. I was the editor of the front page of the high school newspaper, and he was the editor of the back page. We had to work together side by side in the print shop, and that was how it started. On our first date, we went to see April Love with Pat Boone. Then we started going together. Buster had a green coupe, a 1950 Ford with an engine he had hand chromed until it shone, dazzled, reflected the image of anyone who looked into it, anyone usually being Buster, polishing it, or the gas station attendants he constantly asked to check the oil in order for them to be overwhelmed by the sparkle on the valves. The car also had a boot stretched over the back seat for reasons I never understood. Hanging from the rearview mirror, as was the custom, was a pair of Angora dice. A previous girlfriend named Solange, who was famous throughout Beverly Hills High School for having no pigment in her right eyebrow, had knitted them for him. Buster and I would ride around town, the two of us seated to the left of the steering wheel. I would shift gears. It was nice. There was necking, terrific necking, first in the car, overlooking Los Angeles from what is now the Truesdale Estates. Then on the bed of his parents' cabana at Ocean House. Incredibly wonderful, frustrating necking. I loved it, really, but no further than necking. Please don't, please, because there I was, absolutely terrified of the general implications of going a step further with a near dummy, and also terrified of his finding out there was next to nothing there, which he knew, of course. He wasn't that dumb. I broke up with him at one point. I think we were apart for about 2 weeks. At the end of that time, I drove down to see a friend at a boarding school in Palos Verdes Estates, and a disc jockey played April Love on the radio 4 times during the trip. I took it as a sign. I drove straight back to Griffin Park to a golf tournament Buster was playing in. He was the 6th-seeded teenage golf player in Southern California, and presented myself back to him on the green of the 18th hole. It was all very dramatic. That night, we went to a drive-in, and I let him get his hand under my protuberances and onto my breasts. He really didn't seem to mind at all. "Do you want to marry my son?" the woman asked me. "Yes," I said. I was 19 years old, a virgin, going with this woman's son, this big, strange woman who was married to a Lutheran minister in New Hampshire, and pretended she was gentle, and had this son by her first husband, this total fool of a son, who ran the Hero Sandwich concession at Harvard Business School, and whom for one moment, one December in New Hampshire, I had said, as much out of politeness as anything else, that I wanted to marry. "Fine," she said. "Now, here's what you do. Always make sure you're on top of him so you won't seem so small. My bust is very large, you see, so I always lie on my back to make it look smaller, but you'll have to be on top most of the time." I nodded. "Thank you," I said. "I have a book for you to read," she went on. "Take it with you when you leave. Keep it." She went to the bookshelf, found it, and gave it to me. It was a book on frigidity. "Thank you," I said. That is a true story. Everything in this article is a true story, but I feel I have to point out that that story in particular is true. It happened on December 30th, 1960. I think about it often. When it first happened, I naturally assumed that the woman's son, my boyfriend, was responsible. I invented a scenario where he had had a little heart-to-heart with his mother and had confessed that his only objection to me was that my breasts were small. His mother then took it upon herself to help me out. Now I think I was wrong about the whole incident. The mother was acting on her own, I think. That was her way of being cruel and competitive under the guise of being helpful and maternal. You have small breasts, she was saying. Therefore, you will never make him as happy as I have. Or, you have small breasts. Therefore, you will doubtless have sexual problems. Or, you have small breasts. Therefore, you are less woman than I am. She was, as it happens, only the first of what seems to me to be a never-ending string of women who have made competitive remarks to me about breast size. I would love to wear a dress like that, my friend Emily says to me, but my bust is too big. Like that. Why do you think women say that to me? Do I attract these remarks the way the other women attract married men or alcoholics or homosexuals? This summer, for example, I am at a party in East Hampton and I am introduced to a woman from Washington. She is a minor celebrity, very pretty and southern and blonde and outspoken, and I am flattered because she has read something I have written. We are talking animatedly. We have been talking no more than 5 minutes when a man comes up to join us. Look at the two of us, the woman says to the man, indicating me and her. The two of us together couldn't fill an A cup. Why does she say that? It isn't even true, damn it. So why? Is she even more addled than I am on the subject? Does she honestly believe there is something wrong with her breasts, her size breasts, which it seems to me, now that I look hard at them, are just right? Do I conspicuously bring out competitiveness in women in that form? What did I do to deserve it? Well, as for men, there were men who minded and let me know that they minded. There were men who did not mind. In any case, I always minded. And even now that I have been countlessly reassured that my figure is a good one, now that I am a grown-up enough to understand that most of my feelings have little to do with the reality of my shape, I am nonetheless obsessed by breasts. I cannot help it. I grew up in this terrible 50s with rigid, stereotypical sex roles, the insistence that men be men and dress like men, and women be women and dress like women, the intolerance of androgyny. And I cannot shake it, cannot shake my feelings of inadequacy. Well, that time is gone, right? All those exaggerated examples of breast worship are gone, right? Those women were freaks, right? I know all that. And yet here I am, stuck with the psychological remains of it all, stuck with my own peculiar version of breast worship. You probably think I am crazy to go on like this with the shock of recognition, and instead, you are sitting there thinking I am thoroughly warped. Well, what can I tell you? If I had them, I would have been a completely different person. I honestly believe that. After I went into therapy, a process that made it possible for me to tell total strangers at cocktail parties that breasts were the hang-up of my life, I was often told that I was insane to have been bothered by my condition. I was also frequently told by close friends that I was extremely boring on the subject. And my girlfriends, the ones with nice big breasts, would go on endlessly about how their lives had been far more miserable than mine. Their bra straps were snapped in class. They couldn't sleep on their stomachs. They were stared at whenever the word mountain cropped up in geography. And Evangeline, good God, what they went through every time someone had to stand up and recite the prologue to Longfellow's Evangeline. Stand like druids of eld, with beards that rest on their bosoms. It was much worse for them, they tell me. They had a terrible time of it, they assure me. I don't know how lucky I was, they say. I have thought about their remarks, tried to put myself in their place, considered their point of view. I think they're full of shit. And now, my good friend, my compatriot, my fellow actor and muse, Janice Esty.
Thank you, Jeannie. That was very nice. And now we are going to go from 1972 to 2006, the same wonderful author, Nora Ephron, in a piece called Considering the Alternative. When I turned 60, I had a big birthday party in Las Vegas, which happens to be one of my top 5 places. We spent the weekend eating and drinking and gambling and having fun. One of my friends threw 12 passes at the craps table, and we all made some money and screamed and yelled, and I went to bed deliriously happy. The spell lasted for several days, and as a result, I managed to avoid thinking about what it all meant. Denial has been a way of life for me for many years. I actually believe in denial. It seemed to me that the only way to deal with a birthday of this sort was to do everything possible to push it from my mind. Nothing else about me is better than it was at 50 or 40 or 30, but I definitely have the best haircut I've ever had. I like my new apartment, and as the expression goes, consider the alternative. I have been 60 for 4 years now, and by the time you read this, I will probably have been 60 for 5. I survived turning 60. I was not thrilled to turn 61. I was less thrilled to turn 62. I didn't much like being 63. I loathed being 64, and I will hate being 65. I don't let on about such things in person. In person, I am cheerful and Pollyanna-ish. But the honest truth is that it's sad to be over 60. The long shadows are everywhere, friends dying and battling illness. A miasma of melancholy hangs there, forcing you to deal with the fact that your life, however happy and successful, has been full of disappointments and mistakes, little ones and big ones. There are dreams that are never quite going to come true, ambitions that will never quite be realized. There are, in short, regrets. Edith Piaf was famous for singing a song called Non, je ne regrette rien. It's a good song. I know what she meant. I can get into it. I can make a case that I regret nothing. After all, most of my mistakes turned out to be things I survived or turned into funny stories or on occasion even made money from. But the truth is that je regrette beaucoup. There are all sorts of books written for older women. They are, as far as I can tell, uniformly upbeat and full of bromides and homilies about how pleasant life can be once one is free from all the nagging obligations of children, monthly periods, and in some cases, full-time jobs. I find these books utterly useless, just as I found all the books I once read about menopause utterly useless. Why do people write books that say it's better to be older than to be younger? It's not better. Even if you have all your marbles, you're constantly reaching for the name of the person you met the day before yesterday. Even if you're in great shape, you can't chop an onion the way you used to, and you can't ride a bicycle several miles without becoming a candidate for traction. If you work, you're surrounded by young people who are plugged into the marketplace, the demographic, the zeitgeist. They want your job, and someday soon they're going to get it. If you're fortunate enough to be in a sexual relationship, you're not going to have the sex you once had. Plus, you can't wear a bikini. Oh, how I regret not having worn a bikini for the entire year I was 26. If anyone young is reading this, go right this minute, Put on a bikini and don't take it off until you're 34. A magazine editor called me the other day, an editor who, like me, is over 60. Her magazine was going to do an issue on age, and she wanted me to write something for it. We began to talk about the subject, and she said, "You know what drives me nuts? Why do women our age say, 'In my day, this is our day'? But it isn't our day. It's their day. We're just hanging on. We can't wear tank tops. We have no idea who 50 Cent is, and we don't know how to use almost any of the functions on our cell phones. If we hit the wrong button on the remote control and the television screen turns to snow, we have no idea how to get the television set back to where it was in the first place. This is the true nightmare of the empty nest. Your children are gone, and they were the only people in the house who knew how to use the remote control. Technology is a bitch. I can no longer even figure out how to get the buttons on the car radio to play my favorite stations. The gears on my bicycle mystify me. On my bicycle. And thank God no one has given me a digital wristwatch. In fact, if any of my friends are reading this, please don't give me a digital anything. Just the other day, I went shopping at a store in Los Angeles that happens to stock jeans that actually come all the way up to my waist, and I was stunned to discover that the customer just before me was Nancy Reagan. That's how old I am. Nancy Reagan and I shop in the same store. Anyway, I said to this editor, "You're wrong. You are so wrong. This is not our day. This is their day." But she was undaunted. She said to me, "Well, then I have another idea. Why don't you write about age shame?" I said to her, "Get someone who is only 50 to write about age shame. I am way past age shame, if I ever had it. I'm just happy to be here at all." Anyway, the point is, I don't know why so much nonsense about age is written, although I can certainly understand that no one really wants to read anything that says aging sucks. We are a generation that has learned to believe that we can do something about almost everything. We are active. Hell, we are proactive. We are positive thinkers. We have the power. We will take any suggestion seriously. If a pill will help, we will take it. If being in the zone will help, we will enter the zone. When we hear about the latest ludicrously expensive face cream that is alleged to turn back the clock, we will go out and buy it, even though we know that the last 5 face creams we fell for were completely ineffectual. We will do crossword puzzles to ward off Alzheimer's and eat 6 almonds a day to ward off cancer. We will scan ourselves to find whatever can be nipped in the bud. We are in control. Behind the wheel, on the cutting edge, we make lists. We seek out the options. We surf the net. But there are some things that are absolutely, definitively, entirely uncontrollable. I am dancing around the D word, but I don't mean to be coy. When you cross into your 60s, your odds of dying or of merely getting horribly sick on the way to dying spike. Death is a sniper. It strikes people you love, people you like, people you know. It's everywhere. You could be next, but then you turn out not to be. But then again, you could be. Meanwhile, your friends die. And you're left not just bereft, not just grieving, not just guilty, but utterly helpless. There is nothing you can do. Everybody dies. What is the answer? Gertrude Stein asked Alice B. Toklas as Stein was dying. There was no reply. In that case, what is the question? Stein asked. Well, exactly. Well, not quite exactly. Here are some questions I am constantly noodling over. Do you splurge or do you hoard? Do you live every day as if it's your last, or do you save your money on the chance you'll live 20 more years? Is life too short, or is it going to be too long? Do you work as hard as you can, or do you slow down to smell the roses? And where do carbohydrates fit into all of this? Are we really going to have to spend our last years avoiding bread, especially now that bread in America is so unbelievably delicious? And what about chocolate? There's a question for you, Gertrude Stein. What about chocolate? My friend Judy died last year. She was the person I told everything to. She was my best friend, my extra sister, my true mother, sometimes even my daughter. She was all these things, and one day she called up to say, the weirdest thing has happened. There's a lump on my tongue. Less than a year later, she was dead. She was 66 years old. She had no interest in dying right to the end. She died horribly, and now she's gone. I think of her every day, sometimes 6 or 7 times a day. This is the weekend she and I usually went to the Spring Garden and Antique Show in Bridgehampton together. The fire screen in the next room is something she spotted in a corner of that antiques show, and above the fireplace is a poster of a seagull that she gave me only 2 summers ago. It's June now. This is the month one or the other of us would make cornbread pudding, a ridiculous recipe we both loved that's made with cornbread mix and canned cream corn. She made hers with sour cream, and I made mine without. Hi, hun, she would say when she called. Hi, doll. Hello, my darling. I don't think she ever called me or anyone else she knew by their actual name. I have her white cashmere shawl. I wore it for days after her death. I wrapped myself up in it. I even slept in it. But now I can't bear to wear it because it feels as if that's all there is left of my Judy. I want to talk to her. I want to have lunch with her. I want her to give me a book she just read and loved. She is my phantom limb, and I can't believe I'm here without her. A few months before they found the lump on her tongue, Judy and I went out to lunch to celebrate a friend's birthday. It had been a difficult year. Barely a week had passed without some terrible news about someone's health. I said at lunch, what are we going to do about this? Shouldn't we talk about this? This is what our lives have become. Death is everywhere. How do we deal with it? Our birthday friend said, oh, please, let's not be morbid. Yes, let's not be morbid. Let's not. On the other hand, I meant to have a conversation with Judy about death. Before either of us was sick or dying, I meant to have one of those straightforward conversations where you discuss what you want in the eventuality. Well, I say the eventuality, but that's one of the oddest things about this whole subject. Death doesn't really feel eventual or inevitable. It still feels avoidable somehow, but it's not. We know in one part of our brains that we are all going to die, but on some level, we don't quite believe it. But I meant to have that conversation with Judy so that when the inevitable happened, we would know what our intentions were so that we could help each other die in whatever way we wanted to die. But of course, once they found the lump, there was no having the conversation. Living wills are much easier to draft when you are living instead of possibly dying. They're the ultimate hypotheticals. And what difference would it have made if we'd had that conversation? Before you get sick, you have absolutely no idea of how you're going to feel once you do. You can imagine you'll be brave, but it's just as possible you'll be terrified. You can hope that you'll find a way to accept death, but you could just as easily end up raging against it. You have no idea what your particular prognosis is going to be or how you'll react to it or what options you'll have. You have no clue whether you will ever even know the truth about your prognosis, because the real question is, what is the truth and who's going to tell it to us, and are we even going to want to hear it? My friend Henry died a few months ago. He was what we refer to as one of the lucky ones. He died at 82, having lived a full, rich, and successful life. He had coped brilliantly with macular degeneration. For almost 2 years, most of his friends had no idea he couldn't see. And then he wrote a book about going blind that will probably outlast all the rest of his accomplishments, which were considerable. He died of heart failure, peacefully, in his sleep, with his adoring family around him. The day before his death, he asked to be brought a large brown accordion folder he kept in his office. In it were love letters he had received when he was younger. He sent them back to the women who'd written them, wrote them all lovely notes, and destroyed the rest. What's more, he left complete, detailed instructions for his funeral, including the music he wanted, all of this laid out explicitly in a file on his computer he called Exit. I so admire Henry and the way he handled his death. It's inspirational, and yet I can't quite figure out how any of it applies. For one thing, I have managed to lose all my love letters, not that there were that many, and if I ever found them and sent them back to the men who wrote them to me, I promise you they would be completely mystified. I haven't heard from any of these men in years, and on the evidence, they all seem to have done an extremely good job of getting over me. As for instructions for my funeral, I suppose I could come up with a few. For example, if there's a reception afterward, I know what sort of food I'd like served. Those little finger sandwiches from this place on Lexington Avenue called William Poe. And champagne would be nice. I love champagne. It's so festive. But otherwise, I don't have a clue. I haven't even figured out whether I want to be buried or cremated, largely because I've always worried that cremation in some way lowers your chances of being reincarnated, if there is such a thing, which I know there isn't. And yet, I don't want to die, Judy said. I believe in miracles, she said. I love you, she said. And you believe this, she said. No, I can't believe it. I still can't believe it. But let's not be morbid. Let's put little faces on our faces. LOL. Eat, drink, and be merry. Seize the day. Life goes on. It could be worse. And the ever popular, consider the alternative. And meanwhile, here we are. What is to be done? I don't know. I hope that's clear. In a few minutes, I will be through with writing this piece, and I will go back to life itself. Squirrels have made a hole in the roof, and we don't quite know what to do about it. Soon it will rain, and we should probably take the cushions inside. I need more bath oil. And that reminds me to say something about bath oil. I use this bath oil I happen to love. It's called Dr. Hauschka's Lemon Bath. It costs about $20 a bottle, which is enough for about 2 weeks of baths if you follow the instructions. The instructions say 1 capful per bath, but a capful gets you nowhere. A capful is not enough. I've known this for a long time, but if the events of the last few years have taught me anything, it's that I am going to feel like an idiot if I die tomorrow and I skimped on bath oil today. So I use quite a lot of bath oil, more than you could ever imagine. After I take a bath, my bathtub is as dangerous as an oil slick. But thanks to the bath oil, I'm as smooth as silk. I am going to go out and buy more right now. Goodbye. All right. That piece was written in 2006, whereas Jeannie's was written in 1972. But let's go forward a couple of years to 2010 for a short piece called The O Word. I'm old. I am 69 years old. I'm not really old, of course. Really old is 80. No one actually likes to admit that they're old. The most they will cop to is that they're older or oldish. In these days of physical fitness, hair dye, and plastic surgery, you can live much of your life without feeling or even looking old. But then one day, your knee goes, or your shoulder, or your back, or your hip. Your hot flashes come to an end, things droop, spots appear. Your cleavage looks like a peach pit. If your elbows faced forward, you would kill yourself. You're 2 inches shorter than you used to be. You're 10 pounds fatter and you cannot lose a pound of it to save your soul. Your hands don't work as well as they once did, and you can't open bottles, jars, wrappers, and especially those gadgets that are encased tightly in what seems to be molded mylar. If you were stranded on a desert island and your food were sealed in plastic packaging, you would starve to death. You take so many pills in the morning, you don't have room for breakfast. Meanwhile, there's a new conversation about CAT scans and MRIs. Everywhere you look, there's cancer. Once a week, there's some sort of bad news. Once a month, there's a funeral. You lose close friends and discover one of the worst truths of old age. They're irreplaceable. People who run 4 miles a day and eat only nuts and berries drop dead. People who drink a quart of whiskey and smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day drop dead. You're suddenly in a lottery, the ultimate game of chance, and someday your luck will run out. Everybody dies. There's nothing you can do about it, whether or not you eat 6 almonds a day, whether or not you believe in God. Although there's no question a belief in God would come in handy, it would be great to think there's a plan and that everything happens for a reason. I don't happen to believe that. And every time one of my friends says to me, everything happens for a reason, I would like to smack her. At some point, I will be not just old, older or old-ish, I will be really old. I will be actively impaired by age. Something will make it impossible for me to read or speak or hear what's being said or eat what I want or walk around the block. My memory, which I can still make jokes about, will be so dim that I will have to pretend I know what's going on. The realization that I may have only a few good years remaining has hit me with real force, and I have done a lot of thinking as a result. I would like to have come up with something profound, but I haven't. I try to figure out what I really want to do every day. I try to say to myself, if this is one of the last days of my life, am I doing exactly what I want to be doing? I aim low. My idea of a perfect day is a frozen custard at Shake Shack and a walk in the park, followed by a lactate. My idea of a perfect night is a good play and a dinner at Orzo, but no garlic or I won't be able to sleep. The other day I found a bakery that bakes my favorite childhood cake, and it was everything I remembered. It made my week. The other night we were coming up the FDR Drive and Manhattan was doing its fabulous, magical, twinkling thing. And all I could think was how lucky I've been to spend my adult life in New York City. We used to go to our house on Long Island every summer. We wouldn't drive out with the kids the day they got out of school. We would go the next day, and we wouldn't come back until Labor Day. We were always there for the end of June, my favorite time of year, when the sun doesn't set until 9:30 at night and you feel as if you would live forever. On July 4th, there were fireworks at the beach, and we would pack a picnic, dig a hole in the sand, build a fire, sing songs. In short, experience a night when we felt like a conventional American family instead of the divorced, patched together, psychoanalyzed, oh so modern family we were. In mid-July, the geese would turn up. They would fly overhead in formation, their wings beating the air in a series of heart-stopping whooshes. I was elated by the sound. The geese were not yet flying south. Mostly they were just moving from one pond to another. But that moment of realizing, from the mere sound of beating wings, that birds were overhead was one of the things that made the summers out there so magical. In time, of course, the kids grew up and it was just me and Nick in the house on Long Island. The sound of geese became a different thing. The first sign that summer was not going to last forever, and soon another year would be over. Then, I'm sorry to say, they became a sign not just that summer would come to an end, but that so would everything else. As a result, I stopped liking the geese. In fact, I began to hate them. I especially began to hate their sound, which was not beating wings. How could I ever thought it was? But a lot of uneuphonious honks. Now, we don't go to Long Island in the summer, and I don't hear the geese. Sometimes, instead, we go to Los Angeles, where there are hummingbirds And I love to watch them because they're so busy getting the most out of life. 2 years before Nora Ephron died. And now I would like to give you back to Jeannie Walla for one of the finest little comedic pieces I've ever heard in my life.
Thanks, Janice. Good job. You know what a Jewish prince is, don't you? If you don't, there's an easy way to recognize one. A simple sentence. Where's the butter? Okay, we all know where the butter is, right? Don't we? The butter is in the refrigerator. The butter is in the refrigerator in a little compartment in the door marked butter. But the Jewish prince doesn't mean, where's the butter? He means, get me the butter. He's too clever to say, get me, so he says, where's? And if you say to him, in the refrigerator, and he goes to look, an interesting thing happens, a medical phenomenon that has not been sufficiently remarked upon, the effect of the refrigerator light on the male cornea. Blindness. I don't see it anywhere. Where's the butter? Is only one of the ways the Jewish prince reveals himself. Sometimes he puts it a different way. He says, is there any butter? We all know whose fault it is if there isn't, don't we? When he's being really ingenious, he puts it in a way that's meant to sound as if what he needs most of all from you is your incredible wisdom and judgment and creativity. He says, how do you think butter would be with this? He's usually referring to dry toast. I've always believed that the concept of the Jewish princess was invented by a Jewish prince who couldn't get his wife to fetch him the butter.
Yay!
Thank you.
Nice work, guys. Those were amazing readings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Corey.
Absolutely. You know, actually, I thought it might be fun if we just chatted for a few minutes. And I wanted to mention we have a question out there already from Allison Holleran that we'll bring up in a second. But also for anyone else that's out there watching, if you have any questions for Jeannie or Janice, feel free to post them, and we'll see what we can do. Oh, my Chihuahua has decided to join us, I guess.
Oh!
Anyway, Sean, also, I just want to throw out a thank you to Sean Jeffries, who's the wizard behind the curtain that's
kidding.
making all this work back there. So, yeah, Sean Jeffries.
I'm a complete Luddite, and he saved my bacon.
So, Sean, I don't know, maybe if you want to bring up Allison's comment or question, I guess. And so Allison asked Jeannie, what kind of personal nostalgia did you feel from reading your first piece? That's a dangerous question. You can thank Allison for that one.
Thanks, Allison. I'm so glad you're watching. Hi, Allison. Hi, Pat. Well, I was that girl. And even after I was like pretty much grown up, I was the girl that went to work at the Crystal Palace who was not, Janice, bear me out, I was not one of those big busted girls.
No, but you had to wear that really tight thing, so it was a blessing, really, Jeannie.
Yeah. So, and then last summer, I contracted, do you say, breast cancer? And I, without oversharing, I got a new appreciation for my boobalas. So I'm doing great now. Thank you. Been through all my treatments and feeling very lucky, very fortunate.
Jeannie, you look amazing. It was incredible how you just kept such an amazing spirit through that process. I think you handled it with so much grace. So you two might not actually know this, that when I lived in Minneapolis, I worked at Illusion Theater, and I music directed a tour of a breast cancer awareness show.
Wow.
And yes, anyway, I loved hearing your story.
Let's look at that script, Janice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, if anyone else out there has any questions, feel free to post them. But also, Janice, I wondered if maybe you might have just a little bit about Nora Ephron to share with those of us that may not be as familiar with her. I was surprised to hear about some of the movies that she wrote.
Oh, she has been an essayist, a journalist, and a screenwriter. She was nominated for many Academy Awards for things like When Harry Met Sally, Heartburn, absolutely.
Sleepless in Seattle, I think I saw.
Sleepless in Seattle. Heartburn was first a novel that she wrote based on her dissolved marriage to Carl Bernstein, who was, a journalist, which he probably is used to people acknowledging that that's what that was based on. And he's not painted in a particularly pleasant light in that book, but it's witty and it's a wonderful novel adapted by the author for a screenplay. And many other things. I believe she was nominated posthumously for a Tony as well. And she just, and very good cook. She incorporated recipes into a lot of her work. Very impressed with dining and creating food, as well as creating great literature.
Is there a certain philosophy that is sort of an arc through her pieces, or not so much?
I think the one that I read first, above all, be the heroine of your life, not the victim, seems to prevail in most of her writing. But she defaults to humor frequently, but she has a lot of poignancy and a lot of breadth of emotion within her humor, which is quite a gift, I think.
It's nice also, too, that it seems like women are at the forefront of her stories, too, which is always...
Absolutely.
This is more on just a personal note for the two of you, but I'm just curious. We've all been going through this sort of unbelievable, crazy experience with COVID-19, and it's a little up and down, I suppose, for all of us on different days. But how have the two of you been coping, surviving, thriving, any of the above?
Well, for me, I have a husband at home, so I'm not worried about being so alone. And he has been teasing me about the fact that some of my favorite things to do are the New York Times crossword puzzle, available to me. And now that I've started doing it online, I don't think I'll ever go back to paper. And we've also started practicing Tai Chi together.
Oh, wow.
And thanks to my daughter and my other daughter, they have made a living room out of my living room that two of us can do Tai Chi side by side. So
are you watching a class online and then following along, or how?
There are a number of opportunities on YouTube.
Oh.
And you can, well, the biggest choice is, do you want to work with somebody who, when they say right, is actually going left? Do you want to work with somebody who says right when they're going left? And therefore, you mirror them.
It's probably...
these are big decisions that we now have time to concentrate about, illuminate about, and make some important decisions about. Not to end a sentence with a preposition.
You
right.
didn't.
How about you, Janice? What are you doing?
I've been working at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science as a historical enactor for them.
Oh.
And, the museum's closed. But when we go back, one of the characters that I do there is a woman who is a grandmother, but lives in the mining communities in Colorado at the turn of the century. So she can bring a human aspect to the gems and minerals exhibit at the museum and talk about what it was like to be in a family then. But she has been being there in the year 1915. but I'm going to bump her up to about 1919 so she can talk about the Spanish flu when we get back to the museum.
Right.
So I've been working on that, and I've also been baking bread for everybody in the neighborhood, and they now close their drapes and lock their doors when they see me coming because it's pretty cool.
You guys know why they call it the COVID-19, right?
Why, Jeannie?
That's how many pounds we're all going to come out of.
It's probably, I think we're all well on our way at this point. So maybe we can draw this to a close, but first of all, Janice and Jeannie, I really wanted to thank the two of you for coming on, and also to the Pickens County Library for sponsoring this awesome program. And my understanding is that maybe Janice will do more of these.
I would very much like to. Thank you so much, Corey. This was your idea, and I'm so pleased you brought it to us.
Well, I was actually talking to a couple of friends about how, you know, for us with the theater and having a facility, it's difficult sometimes to do collaborations like this because we always have sets that are being built, or, you know, there's time involved in the stage itself. But in this new digital world that we're in right now, it just means we get these really fun opportunities to sort of open ourselves up as an organization to more. So I sort of love so much about these opportunities we're getting. I mean, when would we have been able to do something like this? So,
well, Janice would have been very busy in the library doing it instead. But
yeah.
And should we plug hopefully the upcoming event that features Thunder River's founder, Ron?
Is that next month, Janice?
I think it was scheduled for June. I don't know exactly how we're going to schedule things exactly.
Okay.
I have to talk with the library, and I have to do some fiddling.
Sure. Yeah. Well, anytime that you want to bring people on for these readings, I loved today.
I did too.
Also, I just want to remind everybody again that Thunder River Theater Company will be hosting a virtual variety show that we're calling Extrava Gala. And that's on Thursday, May 7th. And we're already starting to accept pledges. We've actually had some come in already. And if you're interested in donating to support things like what we're doing now on ThunderStream, you can go to our website at thunderrivertheater.com. And hopefully we'll have more of these fun collaborations and more with Janice in the future. And maybe, Jeannie, you can whip up something fun for us too.
Why not?
Why not? So anyway, thank you everybody out there. Thank you again, Jeannie and Janice.
Thank you.
And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. There's some decent weather out there, so maybe you can get out for a
Speak for yourself.
hike. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
And thank you, Sean.
Bye.